Back in 2007, the UFC purchased Pride Fighting Championships from Japan, their only real competition out there. They took their talent, took the customers, took it all, and told them go to hell. That's what happened, and it was great. Now, out of all the fighters they had, we got 7 good ones, 7 that had measurable success in the UFC, and let's go through them all right now. These are some big names here that we got from Pride that did well in the UFC. Pretty well. Not as well as they did in Pride, but pretty well in the UFC. Rampage Jackson, 38-14 overall. He was 12-5 in Pride, 8-5 in the UFC. Mauricio Shogun Hua, 27-14 overall. He was 12-1 in Pride, virtually unbeatable. And the UFC, he was 11 wins, 12 losses. Mark Coleman, 16-10 overall in his career. 6-3 in the UFC to start his career. 8-5 in Pride. Came back and went 1-2 in the UFC. Vanderlei Silva, 35-14 overall. Holy shite. He started 1-2 in the UFC. 22-4 in Pride. Virtually unbeatable. The Axe Murderer. Came back and won 4-5 in the UFC. You see a theme here? Dan Henderson, 32-15 overall. He started 2-0 in the UFC. 13-5 in Pride. Came back and went 3-2 in the UFC. He then went to Strikeforce. He was 3-1 at Strikeforce, and then went 4-7 in the UFC. So he was all over the place. He had 3 stints in the UFC. Miracle Crow Cop, 38-11 overall. 18-4 in Pride. Again, unbeatable in Pride. Comes to UFC, 5-6. He also fought for M1 Global and Ryzen, those farce organizations. And finally, Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira, 34-10 overall. Again, virtually unbeatable in Pride. 17-3 in his Pride record. 5-6 in the UFC. You see what I'm getting at here, folks? So overall, of the 7 fighters that came over from Pride to the UFC, their record in Pride was 112 wins, 27 losses. That's a winning percentage of 81%. They came to the UFC, you know what they turned out to be? 50-50. Winning percentage of 50%. There's a big difference here, folks, and there's the reason why. Pride didn't give a shit about what was in your blood. It said in their contracts specifically, in bold, not in the fine print, in bold, we do not test for steroids. There you go. Why the hell do you think Fedor Emelianenko did so well overseas? Overall, his record's 40 wins, 7 losses. He was 14-0 in Pride, unbeatable, undefeated. And then he goes to all these other M1 Globe and all these other trash organizations, right? In Strikeforce, a legitimate organization, he was 1-3. In Bellator, a legitimate organization, he was 4-3. That's 67% winning percentage. You see the difference here, folks? Am I making sense? Dana White did try to get Fedor Emelianenko to come into the UFC. He tried. He was going to pay him more than any other fighter he's ever paid in the UFC at the time. Okay, he said that. But Fedor wanted him to co-promote a stupid M1 Global organization, some other farce organization overseas. And Dana White said, kiss my ass. I would have said the same thing. Here's to our beloved UFC. Great job purchasing Pride, purchasing Strikeforce. Great job overall. Man, gotta love the UFC, man. More videos to come. Make sure you subscribe to this goddamn channel because there's a lot of good shit coming. Cheers to all of you. That ain't coffee, by the way. And a lot of people ask me, why do you put it in a gigantic coffee mug? Why do you put your beer or whatever it is in a gigantic coffee mug? Well, it seems to hold a lot. It also holds in the cold better than a glass does. Just my opinion, but